Welcome to Land of the Bible. I'm David Sussman, your personal tour guide here in the land of Israel. And in today's episode, we are going to explore the National Memorial and Museum to the Victims of the Holocaust at Yad Vashem. Second only to the Western Wall, Yad Vashem is the most visited site in Israel. It started as a simple memorial in 1953 and evolved into a museum. In 2005, it opened up the brand new historical museum here in Yad Vashem. However, Yad Vashem boasts a 45-acre campus in which one can find memorials and sculptures, such as the Children's Memorial or the Memorial to the Deportees that you see behind me, all of which gives the individual, the visitor, an opportunity to learn about the Holocaust. Let's now go explore this campus and the historical museum here in Yad Vashem. One of the goals here at Yad Vashem is not only to memorialize the victims of the Holocaust, but also to honor those individuals, non-Jews, who risked their own lives as well as their families' lives in order to save an innocent person from the atrocities being committed by the German Nazis. Yad Vashem has planted over 26,000 trees, one for each individual who did just that. Behind me, you can see the trees that honor individuals that you may have heard of, such as Raoul Wallenberg or Oskar Schindler. But I want to focus on one individual, a woman by the name of Irina Sendler. Irina Sendler was hired through the Red Cross by the Nazis to make sure that the diseases that existed within the confines of the Warsaw Ghetto did not jump over the walls and infect the non-Jewish population of Poland. When she entered the ghetto and she saw the horrors that existed there, she said, I need to do something at least for the children. Irina Sendler saved hundreds of children from the Warsaw Ghetto, but she didn't end there. She literally wrote down the names of each individual she took out of the Warsaw Ghetto, and she hid them in her backyard. And at the end of the war, she dug up those names and she went back to the orphanages and the Christian institutions that she dropped them off. And she went to them and she told them that you're an orphan because your parents were killed because they were Jewish, and that they loved you, and that you are Jewish. Not every single child who did survive was saved by a woman like Irina Sendler. Many of them grew up not knowing their true identity. Stay with us as we continue to learn about the Holocaust here at Yad Vashem.
There are moments in life that define you and leave you forever transformed. Like a once-in-a-lifetime journey to the source of your faith. Walk in the steps of Jesus and experience history beyond its words. Sail the ancient Sea of Galilee to the holy shores of the River Jordan. Your journey begins here.
We have the great pleasure today on Land of the Bible of being joined by Yad Vashem Senior Guide Coordinator Avia Doron. Avia, thank you so much for joining us today, and you'll be guiding us through the museum.
Yes, thank you for your time, and let's start the tour.
Wonderful. Avia, before we actually go into the museum, can you tell me a little bit about the architecture of the building?
Well, you can see from the outside the very dramatic architecture of the Holocaust History Museum, made of bare concrete, maybe facing us with the brutality of this story. The museum itself, most of it being underground, you can see is like an arrow cutting through the mountain. On the one hand, it's closed, and on the other hand, open to the beautiful view of the mountains of Jerusalem. Perhaps the fact that we're underground most of the time is taking us to a different place while we talk about the darkest time in human history.
Well, shall we go into the museum?
Of course.
Let's go.
Well, David, in continuation of our opening outside the museum, you can see that the first part that's closed is closed in order to show this video art exhibit, which was created by the Israeli artist Michal Rovner. This exhibit is called Living Landscape. And what Michal did is she took different films, photographs, and she tried to composite them together in order to show us in a 12-minute clip 2,000 years of Jewish life in Europe. And the choice of Yad Vashem to begin with this, and not to begin with 1933 or 1939, different points in history, is to show us what was the Jewish world, and perhaps to give us a perspective of what was lost. Because without understanding the richness and the diversity of the Jewish world before the war, we can't really grasp the magnitude of the tragedy that happened. Now I'll just stop for a moment and point out the highlight of this film, which is the children's choir singing Hatikva in Munkach in the 1930s, before the State of Israel was formed, back when it was only a song expressing the hope of the Jewish people to come to the land of Zion.
Let's continue.
Okay.
So Avia, you explained to us a little bit about the architecture of the building, but now that we're inside, tell us a little bit about the layout of the museum.
Well, I think you noticed immediately as we walked in, it feels very uncomfortable in a way, like it's closing in on you, the museum. And you can notice as we're walking through, the walls do get narrower and narrower, and we're going to be going in a decline. Maybe the idea of a slippery slope, that as we're going through, we don't really notice it until we find ourselves in the lowest, narrowest point. The bare concrete continues throughout the museum, with natural light coming from above us, trying to show us that the Holocaust did not happen in some kind of far-off land or other planet, but happened open to the eyes of the world. And one last thing you can notice is that we can't walk straight through this hallway and note it and, let's say, choose which room we want it to go into. We are forced by the different breaking points to walk into all the different rooms in the museum, and to a certain extent, we, the visitors here, are also trapped in this story. Now let's continue now and go and see the different exhibits. So we've moved forward into the exhibit, into the part talking about Germany in the 1930s. 1933, Hitler comes to power in Germany, and there start gradually but immediately laws and regulations that eventually strip the Jews of their citizenship in Germany. And it's interesting that the Jews in Germany were less than 1% of the general population. They were a tiny minority in Germany, though an extremely assimilated one. And we're now standing next to the exhibit talking about 1938 as a turning point in the history of the Jews in Germany. First of all, Germany expands for the very first time, and now we're not just talking about the German Jews, but also the Austrian Jews, which were not a huge amount either, but it is starting to expand. And also in 1938, we see the first large-scale violent event against the Jews, Kristallnacht, Night of the Shattered Glass, between the 9th and 10th of November 1938, the beginning of a so-called spontaneous pogrom, even though we do know that there were plans to do so. During this pogrom, Hundreds of synagogues were burned down, front windows of stores of Jews were shattered and then vandalized, and this is where the night gets its name from. And the official numbers of the Nazis say that 91 Jews were murdered during this, even though there are different estimations that run the numbers to a much higher amount. But maybe the most dramatic thing, after Kristallnacht, over 30,000 Jews were taken to concentration camps only because of their Judaism, and this is the first time that that happened. Now let's move forward and see how the museum develops.
Avia, 1939. Germany invades Poland, and you have the beginning of World War II. What does this mean for the Jewish population in Eastern Europe?
Well, obviously it has a huge impact. As we saw before, the Jews of Poland were about 10% of the population, and most of them were also living in urban centers. In some cities, like in Warsaw, the Jews were 30% of the population of the city, a huge amount. And with the invasion of Poland, there begin different decrees that eventually lead to a process of ghettoization in Poland. We're now standing in the largest display, talking about the Warsaw Ghetto, the largest ghetto in Europe. What we tried to do here is reconstruct a street. And you can see this is actually an original street brought to Yad Vashem from the Warsaw Ghetto, the tram line, the street lamps, it's all original artifacts. And through this, we can talk about the reality of the Warsaw Ghetto. Once the Nazis decide to close off the Jews in the ghetto, they allocate less than 3% of the territory of the city for over 30% of the population of the city, which obviously brings to extreme living conditions. There was extreme hunger in the Warsaw Ghetto. Many diseases started to spread in the ghetto. But next to that, you can also see behind us the photo of an entrance into one of the theaters in the Warsaw Ghetto. There were actually 6 theaters in the Warsaw Ghetto, showing musicals, comedies, and we see with this how people try and keep on their daily life and their daily routine, even in the reality where thousands are dying on the street.
What a display of absolute perseverance.
True.
Let's continue.
There are moments in life that define you and leave you forever transformed. Like a once-in-a-lifetime journey to the source of your faith. Walk in the steps of Jesus and experience history beyond its words. Sail the ancient Sea of Galilee to the holy shores of the River Jordan. Your journey begins here.
Avia, tell me, how do we go from the ghettos, like in Warsaw, to the concentration camps?
Well, 22nd of June 1941, the Nazis invade the Soviet Union. And from then we can start talking about the evolution of the final solution. On the 20th of January 1942, the Wannsee Conference takes place, and afterwards the camps of the Reinhard operation are open, Treblinka, Sobibor, and Belzec, to which Jews from all over Europe will start to be deported and murdered. We're now standing in a place in the museum that talks about deportations that happened throughout Europe. You can see all around us are photographs from different countries. You'll see Poland, Austria, France, Belgium, and we're now standing also next to the blown up lists of deportations of 3 days that took place in March of 1943. And you can see during these same days, Jews from the Netherlands, from France, from Saloniki, they were all brought to different concentration camps, or death camps, much more accurate to say, and murdered, most of them immediately upon their arrival.
You know, as we were walking through this section, there was one item that really caught my eye. Can I show it to you?
Of course.
So this diamond necklace that we're standing over right now, I'm looking at it, it must be worth $1 million. There must be dozens of diamonds in there.
Well, it's quite an incredible story behind it. This diamond necklace was brought by a Jewish French industrialist that owned many businesses, and once the Nazis occupied France, he realized that he shouldn't be industrious any longer. So he decided to sell his business, and with the money that he made, he bought this diamond necklace for his wife. He and his wife went into hiding, and of course with the diamond necklace, and they hid the diamond necklace beneath the floorboards. At some point, they were caught, they were sent to camps. His wife did not survive the war. He did survive the war, and when he returns, he finds the diamond necklace. And even though he could have sold it and, began his life again, he decided to not touch the necklace, to keep it as the only memento he really had of his wife, of his family, and of his life before the war.
How did it arrive here to Yad Vashem?
Well, it actually came from one of his children. He remarried after the war. He started a family again, quite an incredible ability of his, and they decided to donate it to Yad Vashem, but they requested that it remained anonymous. They didn't want anyone to know his name because they said they don't want to think that he was some kind of special hero, that like him, there are many other stories that may not be known.
Tell me, Avia, what was it like once a transport arrived to one of the concentration camps, like Auschwitz-Birkenau?
Well, once a transport arrived with Jews, immediately starts a selection, which is something unique when you talk about other populations that arrived at the camps. It was only the Jewish population that immediately underwent a selection. After the selection, usually over 90% of the people on the transport were sent immediately to their death. Most of them died completely anonymous death with no tombstone, no grave, and no one in a way to remember them. But next to that, we have here, next to the model of Crematorium 2 in Birkenau, we have here this drawing of Yehuda Bakon. Yehuda Bakon is a Holocaust survivor from Terezin. He was also sent to Auschwitz, and he draws a drawing of his father as he last remembers it, with the exact date and time of his death. He saw his father walking into the gas chambers, and in the smoke in the drawing, you can see the face of his father in those last moments, trying to give his father some kind of individual and human memory.
Avia, there's a picture that's really special to me here in this room. It happens to be of my wife's grandfather. Can I show it to you?
Of course, I'd love to see it.
It's just over here. So this is my wife's grandfather. His name was Benjamin Dombrowski, and Benjamin was in charge of the entire military wing of the Bielski Partizanim. And we have a memoir of his, and he talks about dressing up in Nazi uniforms, going into Nazi bases, and taking all of their supplies, whether it was weapons, ammunition, or food, in order to bring it back to the camp in order to feed the hundreds of Jews that were part of the Bielski Partizanim. Just in his memory, I'll say that my son is named after him. We named our son Binyamin as well. And the reason why is both because Binyamin here was a brave warrior who saved countless of Jews, and who knows how many thousands of Jews are alive today because of him.
We're now standing in the Hall of the Names, the end of the museum, but for me, perhaps the most important part of the museum. Yad Vashem already, when it was formed as an institution in the 1950s, realized that one of our goals is not only to have an archive, research museum, but to ensure that for all of those millions of victims, people who have no grave, no tombstone, and to a certain extent, they have no memory, we need to ensure that there'll be something alternative. And the something alternative is a page of testimony. And you can look above us and see scanned photos of about 600 pages of testimony. And all around us in these binders, Yad Vashem has collected over 4.5 million names. Today we're not just collecting names by pages of testimony, but we're also using lists of deportations, like we saw earlier, different records to try and find as many names as possible. But in this room, you see that there are also empty shelves, because this room is built to hold 6 million names. And I think when looking at the importance of this room within the museum and the fact that they chose to end the museum with this, some kind of virtual cemetery, it's to remind us the purpose of Yad Vashem, a memorial and a name.
Wow, thank you so much. This has been an incredible, powerful, meaningful tour. I can't express my gratitude enough.
Thank you for your time.
Folks, This room is possibly the most powerful for me as I look up at all of these pictures of Jews from all walks of life. You see young ones, old ones, ones that served in the military. But when I look at the faces, I see neighbors of mine. I see people from my family. I see people from the synagogue that I would pray in. And it breaks my heart to think that something like this could happen again.
Join us next time on Land of the Bible as we commemorate Israel's Memorial Day by visiting the Mount Herzl National Cemetery.
Here in Israel, we commemorate, along with the rest of the world, the International Holocaust Memorial Day. But we have an additional day here in Israel. It's called Yom HaShoah V'Gevura. Yom HaShoah in Hebrew means Holocaust Day. V'Gevura means the heroes. And who are those heroes? Well, here in Israel, we name schools, neighborhoods, streets, after the likes of Mordechai Alevich, who was the leader of the Warsaw Uprising. But there are other heroes. Maybe the greatest heroes of all time. We are now joined by Marta Weiss, who is a survivor of the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. Marta, thank you so much for joining us today. I am so humbled and honored to be able to interview somebody like yourself.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and who your parents were?
I was born in Bratislava, Slovakia, to an Orthodox Jewish family. My father was a Jewish activist all his life. We grew up in a house opposite, actually, the President's Palace. It's still standing there.
Can you tell us a little bit about when the Nazis arrived to your town? What happened and how were you separated from your family? Where did you go?
When I was 8 years old in '42, when the Czechoslovakian Jews were more or less completely decimated by being sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau and Treblinka, my parents decided that it's time, that no matter what arrangements my parents made about hiding us, it's no longer safe. So they decided to send us away. My parents sent us to a place called Nitra. Eva and myself, my sister, who was in Auschwitz with me, she was 13, I was 10. We went to Nitra, where we lived as evacuated Catholic children.
In 1944, you were captured by the Nazis and brought to Auschwitz-Birkenau. How did that episode happen?
They were looking for Jews, and we kept Shabbat. We tried to keep Shabbat. And
so they knew you were Jewish because of that?
Yeah, because of that, because we did differently. We didn't do, in this big building where all these people lived, we didn't do anything on a Shabbat. Mm-hmm. We didn't get our ration.
So other school children knew that you were Jewish?
No, they suspected it and they reported us. We were taken on the 8th of October. We were taken on my birthday. We held out for a few weeks to say that we are not Jewish, because Eva, my sister Eva, happened to go to school with the 16-year-old daughter of the top SS. Wow. And what does a Jewish child do? She makes friends with the child of a top SS. So she used to go there often. He found out she plays chess, so he used to come to our apartment playing chess with Eva. He was so convinced that we are perfect Catholics that he even said that in December '44 he's going to bring his SS Todeskopf son, 19-year-old son, back to Berlin for Christmas, and he'll take us there to introduce her as a shidduch.
Wow. So when you arrived to Auschwitz-Birkenau, what exactly happened?
It was not describable what happened. When we arrived, we stopped. We were told to get off the train. I mean, we were told to get off. We were pushed off the train. We were told then that to line up in fives. women and children on one side, men on the other side, and start walking to the gentleman at the end. We found out very quickly that the gentleman at the end was the monster Mengele, Joseph Mengele himself.
He was the German Nazi doctor who conducted experiments on Jewish children.
Including on us. But on the day we arrived, we were told, given a pep talk, one louse, your death, one cough, your death. So how could you not have lice? Because they knew that they are going to give us clothing which stands up. It's so full of lice that it stands up by itself. And how can you not get a cough in those skin rags that we were given? And the temperature was freezing.
How is it possible that you managed to survive so long in those horrible conditions in Auschwitz?
I think God saved us. You know what you must remember? Yes, it sounds like it is a miracle that we survived and that anybody survived, but you must remember that it was nothing compared to the number that didn't survive. It was just the sprinkling of people who survived.
Today, anti-Semitism seems to be on the rise.
Yeah.
What do you say to the people out there who don't think that Israel has the right to exist?
For no rhyme or reason, because what Israel does and what Israel has achieved is more than any other country in the world at the moment, in this short time. And that are just plain anti-Semites, that otherwise they wouldn't talk like that.
If you had a message to give to the entire world, what would that message be?
We survived till now against all odds, and we will survive because we are God's chosen people.
I get goosebumps just hearing that. Thank you so much, Marta Weiss, for joining us here today and sharing a little bit of your story with all of our viewers out there. Marta, we're in the Hall of Remembrance, and we can see the names of the various concentration camps and the killing sites. And we even have some ashes here from the various camps. And of course, we have the eternal flame. Join me as we rekindle this light in memory of the 6 million. Thank you once again for watching Land of the Bible. I'm David Sussman, your personal tour guide here in the land of Israel. And on your next adventure through the Holy Land, make sure to commemorate the Holocaust by visiting Yad Vashem.